The Falcon 9 rocket on screen is vertical at Space Launch Complex 40 in Florida, and we are awaiting liftoff at 1 a.m. Eastern Time from Florida. As you may have guessed by the mission name, our customer for today's launch is Intelsat. Today's launch is the 8th Intelsat launch in 10 months, and it's the 40th anniversary of the first Galaxy satellite, which was launched back in June of 1983. Onboard Falcon 9's second stage is the Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 or G-37H4 payload. Manufactured by Maxair, today's launch will further advance Intelsat's comprehensive Galaxy fleet refresh plan. G-37H4 is a single satellite expected to enter service by October of 2023. It will provide North American capacity for television media and telecommunication network customers and continuity for mobility, network, and U.S. government customers. It will be owned jointly by Intelsat and JSAT International, which is the U.S.-owned subsidiary of SkyPerfect JSAT Corporation. And with that, here's a little more on Intelsat and their payload.
Intelsat began by defining and delivering solutions that shape the way we connect to one another. As the foundational architects of satellite technology, we are still at the forefront, exceeding expectations for network speeds and reliability and ensuring frictionless access wherever the need may be. Today, Intelsat is the partner of visionaries who accept no limits. Industry leaders, government forces, and entire communities turn to Intelsat to help them achieve their next firsts. Many of the innovative firsts have been delivered by Galaxy satellites. This summer marks the 40th anniversary of the start of the Galaxy constellation. Intelsat and its legacy companies have delivered 4 decades of reliable satellite service around the globe, thanks to the Galaxy satellites. With our latest launch, Galaxy 37 Horizons 4, Intelsat continues that legacy of excellence and advances the comprehensive Galaxy Fleet Refresh Plan.
This satellite launch, Galaxy 37 Horizon 4 with SpaceX Falcon 9, is actually going to be the 8th satellite that we launch over the last 10 months. And this is unprecedented for the industry. 8 geostationary satellite launch within 10 months. Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 is replacing Galaxy 13 Horizon 1. So it has 2 missions. The primary mission is the C-band mission for our media customer over North America, including Alaska. The secondary mission is a Ku-band mission that's covering our mobility and network customer, although North America, but in addition, the Pacific Ocean. That Ku-band mission is actually a joint venture between Intelsat and JSAT.
The H4 Ku-band payload will provide continuity for our mobility, network, and U.S. government customers and will be owned jointly by Intelsat and JSAT International, the U.S.-owned subsidiary of SkyPerfect JSAT Corp.
The relationship between Intelsat and JSAT is a very, very important. We, JSAT, mainly our customer is very domestic. However, emphasizing such a relationship with Intelsat, we can strengthen the name value in overseas.
JSAT has been a very trusted partner of Intelsat over the years, starting with Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, and now Horizon 4 joint venture. So we're extremely pleased to be working with JSAT over the years.
The Falcon 9 vehicle that you see on the pad is a 2-stage rocket designed and manufactured by SpaceX. Standing at 229 feet tall, the Falcon 9 is about 40 feet taller than the Leaning Tower of Pisa in Italy. And for all you Star Wars fans out there, Falcon 9 was named after the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. The number 9 indicates the number of Merlin 1D engines on the first stage, which makes up the bottom 2/3 of the vehicle. Speaking of the first stage, its objective is to accelerate the vehicle through the Earth's atmosphere to space and then separate from the rest of the rocket. The first stage, also referred to as the booster, is flying for the 6th time today. It previously supported Crew 5, GPS-3 Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat I6-F2, CRS-28, and a past Starlink mission. And we will attempt to recover this booster again on our drone ship. Just read the instructions, which you see there on your screen now. And if successful, this will mark our 213th landing of an orbital-class rocket, and that includes both Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy vehicles. Moving up above the first stage is the second stage, which has a single Merlin vacuum or MVAC engine that ignites after the two stages separate from one another. The second stage is what will carry the Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 satellite into orbit. And speaking of the payload, it's currently safely enclosed inside of that 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is that large barrel structure with the pointed nose at the very top of the rocket. Made of a carbon composite material, the fairing protects the payload from aerothermal heating and contamination on its trip to space before being jettisoned about 3 minutes into flight. And much like the first stage, the fairing halves on today's flight are flight-proven. One half is flying for the 8th time today, and the other half is flying for its 10th time. After separation, the fairing halves will return to Earth to be recovered by our recovery vessel, Bob. And lastly, that large truss structure you see next to the Falcon 9 is the Transporter Erector, or the TE. We use it to roll the rocket out to the pad and raise it to its vertical launch position. The TE also routes the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry umbilicals from the ground systems to the rocket and the satellites until F9 goes on internal power and clears the pad. And under 5 minutes prior to liftoff, the TE will retract away from the rocket in preparation for liftoff. And from there, we'll be well on our way to delivering the Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 to GTO, or geostationary transfer orbit. Now, getting to orbit is not as simple as it sounds. In order to get the rocket and payload into any orbit, the rocket has to not only go up really fast, but it also has to go sideways. As we ascend, we tilt the engines, and that turns the rocket horizontally. So to help demonstrate this concept, imagine firing a cannon from a really high mountain. The cannonball will arc, and then good old gravity will pull it down to Earth.
Load complete.
As you increase the power, the cannonball will arc and land farther and farther away. Eventually, if you could continue to increase the power, the cannonball will end up in free fall around the Earth. Basically, gravity is pulling down on the cannonball, but it's going so fast that it never hits the ground. And this arc that constantly misses the Earth is called an orbit. Falcon 9 effectively does the same thing as the cannonball in this example. It provides enough power and horizontal velocity to the spacecraft on board the second stage that the spacecraft is placed in orbit around the Earth. And you'll be able to see this today by watching the orientation of Falcon 9 after liftoff. The rocket will go straight up until about T plus 10 seconds, at which point we begin that shift in orientation by gimbaling the engine so Falcon 9 can go horizontally really fast. So be sure to take a look at that after liftoff. Now, at just about 5 minutes and 20 seconds until launch, we should see those clamp arms beneath the fairing open up in preparation for a strongback retract. And once we see those clamp arms open around the second stage, we'll see the TE begin to pull away from the rocket just slightly. Then at T0, ground hydraulic systems will pull the TE even further away from the Falcon 9 as it lifts off.
Pressing for strongback retract.
Just sort of call out that we are pressing the tanks ahead of that strongback retract. Those clamp arms should start to open in just around 30 seconds or so.
Strongback lower has started.
And there's that call out for those arms starting to open up. You should be able to see them just below the fairing halves there on the second stage. As you can see there, the arms are now opening up. And again, once those arms open up, the strongback will retract away from the rocket. At this point in the countdown, both the first and the second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Falcon 9 uses two propellants, a refined form of kerosene called RP1, or Rocket Propellant 1, as a fuel, and LOX, or liquid oxygen, as an oxidizer. An oxidizer is a type of chemical that a fuel requires in order to burn. The liquid oxygen is chilled below its boiling point so that it has a much greater amount of mass per volume, and that's basically so we can load more of it into the rocket. In addition to these two propellants, we also use the chemical TTEB, or triethyl aluminum and triethyl borane, as an ignition source. The combustion of RP1 and LOX is what makes the rocket go, and it's the TTEB that sets the match to the propellant mix. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup, and this means that the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers have taken over the launch.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Have taken over the launch countdown. And just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we will light those 9 Merlin 1D engines for liftoff. So far, the Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 payload continues to be healthy, and the Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. Currently, weather is green, and the range is ready to support a T0 of 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Teams are currently reporting an 80% probability of launch today based on weather. Now, coming up next in around 30 seconds, we should hear a call out for second stage LOX load completion, and that will end the propellant loading process. Those white
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
Just heard that call out for Stage 2 LOX load completion. So with that, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with propellant. Those white clouds you see venting from the TE LOX line is a completely normal part of the process.
Ground gas closeouts. Falcon 9 is in startup.
As we just heard, Falcon 9 is in startup, which means the vehicle's internal flight computers have now taken over control of the launch countdown.
SpaceX launch director, go for launch.
And there we go, folks, with the final go for launch from our launch director. All systems are go for launch of Falcon 9 with the Galaxy 37 Horizons 4 satellite.
30 seconds. Seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff for Falcon 9. Go Falcon, go Galaxy 37.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
T plus 30 seconds into flight, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Pad 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. During ascent, we'll tilt the engines in a technical term called gimbaling, and that will turn the rocket horizontally in what we call a gravity turn.
Nominal power and telemetry.
Now we're still going up, but we're also heading horizontally away from the launch pad. And the rocket typically needs to go about 17,500 miles per hour horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth and reach orbit.
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
Just like that cannonball I mentioned earlier in the webcast. Now coming up, we should throttle down the Merlin 1D engines in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Max Q.
And there's that call out. We did just pass through the point of max Q. And now we have 3 events coming up in quick succession, starting with MECO, Stage SEP, and SES-1. Main engine cutoff, or MECO, is the point during the flight where we shut down those 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. Shortly after that, stages 1 and 2 will separate from each other, and that's so that the second stage isn't carrying unnecessary mass to orbit, and of course, the first stage booster begins its trip back down to Earth. Second engine start 1, or SES-1, will be when we ignite the Merlin vacuum engine onboard the second stage.
Nominal trajectory.
So we're coming up on those events in around 40 seconds, so let's keep a close eye on our screen for those events. Getting some great views of the ascent of the first stage here. You can see the plume of the rocket is expanding as the surrounding atmospheric pressure decreases.
MECO. Stage separation confirmed. And vac ignition.
There we go, folks. You just heard and saw those 3 events that happened back to back. Those were MECO, Stage Sep, and SES-1. Coming up next in around 30 seconds will be fairing separation. As a reminder, on the left side of your screen, you are seeing a live view of the first stage. And on the right side of your screen, you're seeing a live view of the MVAC engine attached to the second stage. Now keep a close eye on the telemetry in the bottom left and right corners of your screen. You can see MVAC is continuing to accelerate the payload faster and faster. And stage 1 is actually slowing down as it is no longer under power of rocket engines.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And there we go. There go those 2 fairing halves. We will be attempting to retrieve both of those again today once they fall back to Earth, and we'll be using our recovery vessel Bob for that. Coming up next are the 2 burns on the first stage, and that is to prepare us for landing on our drone ship. Just read the instructions.
Acquisition signal, Bermuda.
Now we're just about T+4 minutes into today's mission. We are currently in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns prior to satellite deployment. At around T+6 minutes, you should see on your screen the first
Both
stages.
vehicles remain on a nominal trajectory.
You should see the first stage's entry burn at about T+6 minutes. Now for the entry burn, we do relight 3 of the M1D engines, and that's starting with the center E9 engine, followed shortly after by the E1 and E5 engines. And that slows the vehicle down as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. Now, we need to slow down the vehicle to reduce re-entry forces, and that helps us recover and reuse the first stage. So be sure to follow along with the telemetry in the bottom left and right corners of your screen. During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving very rapidly. So this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also sometimes called the rocket's plume, and this deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle's surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 uses. So again, coming up on the entry burn in about a minute and 10 seconds from now. Currently getting a great view of the MVAC engine continuing its burn. We are now traveling over 12,000 kilometers per hour as we head to orbit. You can see that beautiful orange glow of the MVAC nozzle extension. That's one of the methods that the nozzle uses to cool itself during burn. Again, on the left side of your screen is a view of the first stage. Should be starting up for the entry burn in just around 15 seconds.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 FTS is saved.
And there's that call out. We did just start up engines 1, 5, and 9 for the entry burn. This burn is around 20 seconds in total. You can see in the telemetry in the bottom left side of your screen that the vehicle is slowing down rapidly now.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And there we go. Just had confirmation of stage 1 entry burn shutdown. As a reminder, the first stage that's supporting today's mission will perform the entry burn for the 6th time. It has previously supported Crew 5, GPS-3 Space Vehicle 6, Inmarsat I6-F2, CRS-28, and a past Starlink mission. Falcon 9 is, of course, the world's first orbital-class reusable rocket, and this is important because reusability allows SpaceX to refly the most expensive parts of the rocket, and that in turn drives down the cost of space access. Next milestone coming up is the shutdown of the MVAC engine on the second stage, and that'll be followed quickly by our landing burn on the first stage. So we do have about 30 more seconds.
Guidance.
30 more seconds in the first burn of MVAC. As you can see now, we are traveling over 23,000 kilometers per hour.
Stage 1 transonic. Stage 2 FTS is saved. Stage 1 landing burn. MVAC shutdown.
There's SECA 1. We're just waiting confirmation of a good orbit and a stage 1 landing.
Nominal orbit insertion.
There we go. Great news there. Confirmation of a good orbit.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
There you have it, folks.
Expected losses, Cape.
That landing marks SpaceX's 213th recovery of an orbital-class rocket, and that includes first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy missions. Now, the mission isn't over just yet. The second stage is now embarking on its first coast phase. After this coast phase, we will light that MVAC engine for a second time around the T plus 26-minute mark. So we'll see you back here in about